Every time you check a clock, you are interacting with the math of a 5,000-year-old society. The division of a minute into 60 seconds and an hour into 60 minutes is a direct inheritance from the people who built the world's first cities. Those people were the Sumerians. Roughly 6,000 years ago, they established the earliest known urban civilization in the alluvial plains of southern Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. What we now call the cradle of civilization was physically an unforgiving place. The flat, hot landscape was entirely devoid of stone, timber, or metal ore. To build a shelter or craft a tool, the only abundant materials available were reeds and mud. And then there was the water. While the rivers provided necessary silt, their annual floods were wildly unpredictable. Surges of muddy water could wash away crops, livestock, and entire settlements without warning. This environment forced a brutal binary choice on the people living there. They either had to engineer radical new systems to tame a hostile geography, or they would simply perish. Survival required controlling the water. The Sumerians responded by cutting extensive networks of irrigation canals, dikes, and reservoirs into the arid earth to divert and store the violent floodwaters. Digging and maintaining these massive earthworks was not something a single family could accomplish. It demanded the coordinated, sustained physical labor of hundreds of people working together. To manage that massive workforce, a complex social hierarchy took shape. Priest administrators and early kings, known as the Lugal, emerged specifically to direct this labor and distribute the resulting resources. As these canal networks grew, so did the friction over who owned which tract of land and who had access to the water. Resolving these disputes required a standardized set of rules, leading to the earliest codified civil laws in human history. The hallmarks of modern civilization, centralized government, administrative bureaucracies, and legal codes, began as emergency management systems to keep the rivers from drowning the crops. Once the water was under control, the nutrient-rich silt produced grain yields on a massive scale. This agricultural surplus quickly grew too large for any single person to track by memory. This clay tablet shows the result. Cuneiform was not created for poetry or history, but as an accounting tool to track barley, livestock, and labor debts. Over centuries, these basic pictographs were refined into complex, abstract wedge-shaped symbols, representing specific spoken words. Alongside writing, administrators needed a robust way to calculate taxes, survey large tracts of land, and project future crop yields. This diagram illustrates their solution, a sexagesimal or base 60 numeral system. Instead of counting by tens, as we do in a base 10 system, Sumerian mathematics organized values into fractions and multiples of 60, allowing for highly complex divisions. The ability to preserve human thought in writing and the advanced mathematics used to measure the physical world were accidental byproducts of bureaucrats trying to count grain. As populations swelled into the tens of thousands, the Sumerians faced the staggering challenge of constructing urban infrastructure without quarries or forests. They built entire megacities using millions of sun-baked mud bricks. The pinnacle of this engineering was the ziggurat. These massive, stepped pyramids dominated the flat skyline, functioning as fortified economic storehouses for the city's wealth and as elevated sanctuaries to bridge the gap to the divine. The religion practiced within those temples was heavily shaped by the landscape. Because the rivers were prone to violent, sudden destruction, the Sumerians viewed the cosmos as deeply unpredictable, ruled by capricious and terrifying gods. Their mythology reflected this grim reality. They believed humans were fashioned from clay for a single purpose, to perform the grueling agricultural labor the gods refused to do themselves. Early urban planning and organized monumental religion were tightly linked defense mechanisms. They were practical and psychological systems built to appease an environment that could wash a city away in an afternoon. Even with their agricultural wealth and soaring temples, the Sumerians remained geographically trapped. They had endless supplies of food and clay, but absolutely no timber for construction or copper for durable tools and weapons. That intense material poverty forced them to look outward. They established sprawling, long-distance trade networks, exchanging their surplus textiles and grain for resources from as far away as the Indus Valley and the Levant. Moving massive quantities of heavy grain across hundreds of miles required mechanical assistance. The Sumerians adapted the wheel for heavy transport carts and deployed early sailboats to navigate the river routes. Doing business across vast, unpoliced territories introduced a massive vulnerability. Merchants needed a reliable way to authenticate contracts and verify the identity of the sender when a shipment finally arrived. This carved cylinder seal shows their solution. By rolling a small, uniquely carved piece of stone across wet clay, officials created a distinct, verifiable relief pattern, the ancient equivalent of an encrypted digital signature. Sumer's complete lack of natural resources paradoxically turned it into the technological engine of the ancient Near East. Sheer necessity drove continuous, rapid invention. Eventually, the very system that created Sumer caused its ruin. Centuries of intensive irrigation steadily pulled minerals to the surface, causing severe salinization that slowly poisoned the agricultural soil. As crop yields plummeted from the salt crust, the weakened city-states could no longer defend their borders. Combined with relentless foreign invasions, this ecological collapse permanently shattered Sumerian political independence by 2000 BCE. The Sumerian people, as a distinct ethnic group, vanished. Their spoken language, an isolate with no known linguistic relatives, completely died out as a vernacular. Yet, the empires that conquered southern Mesopotamia did not erase Sumerian culture. The incoming Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians were so reliant on Sumerian administrative blueprints that they adopted their laws, mathematics, and writing wholesale. The dead spoken tongue persisted for thousands of years in scribal schools and temples as a sacred scholarly language, much like Latin in medieval Europe, locking their foundational ideas into the historical record. The physical mud-brick walls of Eridu and Uruk eventually washed back into the marsh, but the organizational software they developed proved immortal. They demonstrated how human ingenuity could engineer a way around environmental limits, writing the baseline operating code for all global civilizations to follow.